Political science professor from UBC. And Max, we spent the debate night, the Maclean's debate night together out at UBC with a group of people that you had gathered together. How this campaign has changed since then. What do you see?
It really has. I mean, it started off looking like a fairly tight three-way race. The New Democrats ahead, coming off of their opposition to Bill C-51, looking like representing perhaps the strongest challenge to the Harper Conservatives. And then over the course of this campaign, we've really seen the NDP slide and the Liberals emerge under Justin Trudeau. I think there are a number of things there. Partly, the NDP's numbers were inflated from the outset. There are a lot of anyone but Harper supporters behind the NDP, and I think as the niqab issue hit in Quebec and then Justin Trudeau performing well in the debates, a lot of people began to look at the Liberals, and we've seen their numbers move, and really that's been at the expense of the NDP.
Okay, let's go to the Conservatives first, because there seems to be that overwhelming sort of buzz that the goal here is to make sure that Stephen Harper's Conservatives do not have a majority government yet again. So people are voting strategically. Talk a little bit about what a strategic vote is like, what it looks like for people heading to the polls Monday.
Yeah, I think that's a fascinating part of this whole race. I think in a way that's quite unprecedented. We're seeing strategic voting. I mean, to some degree, there's always strategic voting. People look to the candidate that they think is going to not only be closest to their own preferences, but is likely to have the effect that they want in terms of whether they want to vote out or protect an incumbent. But in this case, what we see is a really concerted effort to organize strategic voting. So there are organizations out there that are getting people to pledge to vote together, and then they're making decisions riding by riding. Who is the candidate best able to unseat or prevent a Conservative from winning? And then instructing the people who have pledged to vote with them on how to vote. So that's what's really interesting.
Is that similar to vote swapping?
It is. I mean, vote swapping I don't think it's quite as well organized, but that's where, you know, I'm a New Democrat, but in the riding that I'm in, the best candidate to defeat the Conservatives is a Liberal.
Right.
So I'll vote Liberal if you promise that you as a Liberal, where there's a strong NDP candidate, you'll vote for the NDP. Same kind of thing.
So what do you think of Justin Trudeau? What did Justin Trudeau do so well in the last 2 months that has put him so far ahead that some people are even saying, you know, the Liberals could end up with a majority?
Yes, I mean, the current poll projections have them with about 140 seats, but they seem to have the momentum. You know, I think there's still a lot at play in Quebec. I think that BC is important, but when we look at voter volatility, Quebec is the real story here, and what happens on election day in Quebec, I think, is going to be really absolutely critical. So that, of course, is where the NDP and the Orange Crush in the last election gained a lot of seats. I think that the Liberals and the Conservatives have been making inroads there against the NDP. But I think there were low expectations of Trudeau, and he surprised people in his debate performance. In some sense, he even outflanked the NDP on the left, promising to run deficits so that he can give tax breaks to the middle class. And so the NDP running a very conservative strategy from the outset, I think over time we saw voters beginning to wonder whether, in fact, Justin Trudeau was perhaps the person with the best shot at defeating the Conservatives.
It's kind of fascinating sitting at Thanksgiving dinner. All of us were very concerned that we would all start talking politics. And little did we realize it was the teenagers at the kids' table behind us with a 19-year-old, an 18-year-old, two 16-year-olds, and a 14-year-old. They were talking politics, and the overwhelming discussion was from the one 18-year-old saying, 2 of my friends are turning 18 2 weeks after this election, and they're so mad. How can we take into consideration the power of the youth movement?
Yeah, well, I think that's really quite wonderful. In the last election in 2011, 6 out of 10 youth people between 18 and 24 did not vote. Very low levels of voting, and I think the big concern is if you don't vote in one election, you get into the habit of not voting. So I think it's wonderful to see that there's a real push, particularly on social media. We see a lot of that to get the youth vote out. A lot of organizations encouraging youth to participate, and we may well see. I mean, if advanced polls are an indication, it does appear that this is an election that people care about. And if there is a higher turnout, and particularly among youth, I think that would be a very positive thing for our democracy.
So we're heading to the polls on Monday. Any advice as to what the best time is to head to the polls?
Well, you know, there is that baseball game. I mean,
there's a little bit of that thing,
so probably
don't say I'm not a baseball game, Max. I'll make you very unpopular right now.
I'm sorry, I'm
That's
a nerdy
okay.
academic.
So yes, there is.
Yes, there is. So maybe get out there and go early. I think a lot of the advanced polling was, there are new rules around the kind of ID you have to have and that sort of thing. And I think that may have affected people's.
And what's the new rule?
Well, so for example, if you have a driver's license, you're in good shape because that's got a photo and it's got your
current address.
Your current address.
Yes.
If you don't, you have to have a couple of pieces of legitimate ID.
Yeah, there was some controversy over whether or not it needed to be photo ID, but if you have like a bill that reflects your home address that is equal to your voter card, you've got to take that voter card.
That'll make it faster, more efficient.
Thank you so much, Max Cameron.
Thank
Keeping
you.
us in the loop. I'm sure we'll be talking to you next week. We'll see how this all shakes down.